that's good to hear. Okay, great. So I am here today with Will Parson from the Chesapeake Bay program. Will, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us a little bit about your job. So can
Yes,
you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what your job actually is?
sure. So, again, my name is Will Parson, and I am the multimedia manager for the Chesapeake Bay program. Uh, I'm staffed by the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and the Bay program itself is a partnership of organizations that leads and directs the Chesapeake Bay restoration effort. So we create, produce a lot of the science and monitoring that goes into the decision making at the local level that gets restoration done. So as a multimedia manager, I am producing visual stories about everything from recreation to restoration to the history and the daily lives of people in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Um, the region we cover is 64,000 square miles, so I'm traveling not as much as people think. Most of my days are spent in the office, but I do travel up to New York and down to Virginia and to West Virginia and Delaware and everywhere in between. Mostly Maryland, but I try to get to Pennsylvania and the other states and DC as well. Um, I've been here 6 years, and when I started, I was splitting my time maybe 50-50 between photo and video projects. The process is a matter of figuring out the best way to tell a story, whether it's through a series of pictures or combination of pictures and text, or a video that leads into a written story. Nowadays, I'm doing maybe 4 video projects a year, but they tend to be larger projects as opposed to like shorter ones that just accompany a blog post. And I'm spending most of my time tracking down photos and figuring out the best visuals to accompany a story. So I'm sort of a photo editor who assigns myself to photo assignments out in the field.
Very cool. So a lot of kind of interpreting the science, things that are going out in a really visual way for the public then, basically.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. And as a visual storyteller, interpreting the science means like how do I humanize this story? How can I show what's at stake? Especially because a lot of science stories are more abstract, or we're talking about like new grants announced for restoration projects. We can at least show what those will impact in terms of people and places and species. So oftentimes it might be an event where people are speaking, but the visuals might be the picture of the hellbender, or the picture of the brook trout or the other species that stands to benefit.
Very cool. So as you kind of mentioned, people tend to think there's a lot of travel. What is a typical day like, or is there such a thing as a typical day?
Um, so a typical day, I'm planning. I might be planning my next trip. So, for example, this week I'm planning a trip up to Pennsylvania, New York, for next week, which will be a little larger of a trip than usual. Usually, it's out and back in the course of a day, but this one will be a few nights stayed up in New York. So a combination of planning trips and then editing stuff that I've photographed recently. So I will plan an assignment, go out, might be half a day or a full day with somebody or a person or a place usually. Come back with a few hundred photos, come back and edit those for initial selects, and then narrow it down to 1 to 5 photos that help tell the story. And those end up in the story, on our website, chesapeakebay.net, and then our Instagram account, and then ultimately our archive, which to serve the mission of the Bay program, we make that archive available for non-commercial use. So we share it with a lot of our partner organizations, as well as just anybody from the public can request those photos.
Cool. And do you have to like make all the contacts, reach out? Do you probably have to spend a lot of time reaching out to people and kind of tracking down who's the right person to talk to? How do you find people?
Yeah, so the process might start with a topic, like stream restoration or conservation of a given species, and then my work is to turn that into an actual story. Hopefully with hopefully a personal story that somebody's personal narrative can shed light on what the reader can do in their own activities. So we do a lot of education and inspiring people to become stewards. So oftentimes the way to do that is to find people's personal stories of how they became motivated to make a difference in their community. So, for example, planting trees along streams is a big effort to reduce pollution, reaching local waterways and ultimately the Chesapeake Bay. I try to go beyond just visiting a park where trees have been planted to find say a landowner on a farm or the otherwise, and to interview them about their motivations, and then maybe get them in their daily life, or a portrait along the stream or something like that helps tie their story into the restoration effort.
That's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to this job, kind of the path you took, education, experiences that helped you get where you are?
Sure. So I did my undergrad. I went to University of California, San Diego, graduated in 2008, right at the start of the Great Recession. My degree was actually in ecology, behavior, and evolution. And so I had volunteered in a biology lab, but about halfway through my undergrad, I started working at the school newspaper, and I got hooked on the new experiences that offered me. I decided I didn't want to spend my time just cooped up in a lab. As an introvert, I saw the value in forcing myself to meet new people and gain new experiences. And so even though I went towards the journalism route, I still had interests in science and environmental issues because of my foundation in biology and ecology. And so when I graduated, I didn't have too clear of a plan, but I decided to make a go of it as a freelance photographer working in San Diego. So I got a few steady clients that did pay very well, but I was able to scrape by and gain experience and pitch stories to a weekly newspaper in San Diego, and to an online investigative news website. So even though I was doing general assignments, I still added environmental stories to my portfolio. And then ultimately I decided to go back to graduate school at Ohio University, which has a great school of visual communication. And it's my interest there was to get a foot into a tight-knit community nationwide of photojournalists and visual storytellers. So in 2 years at Ohio University, I continued to do a mix of stories, but I photographed a series on acid mine drainage, which is a problem in Southeast Ohio where the campus is. I first learned about hellbenders when I was researching topics in Southeast Ohio, and I saw that there were efforts to improve the health of streams for that species and others. I got internships at the Hartford Current newspaper in Connecticut, as well as the Concord Monitor in New Hampshire, and then ultimately the Valley News, also in New Hampshire / Vermont. And going back, but halfway through grad school, I got a bit of funding that I heard about through an environmental journalism course that I'd taken, a writing course. That there was a professor with some grant funding to go tell stories about water and sustainability in Nova Scotia. So I spent 6 weeks, my middle summer in grad school, went to Nova Scotia and did a couple video stories on a lobster hatchery in Pictou. And then I spent time in Halifax and met a longline cod fisherman who supplied more sustainable fish to instead of a CSA, they called it a CSF, community supported fishery. So, did those stories. And then by the time I was wrapping up my internships, I was working temporarily at a newspaper at the Concord Monitor again. And my classmate who had stayed in touch had sent me this job listing for the Chesapeake Bay program and said, hey, this sounds perfect for you. So when I applied, I was able to show, a photo essay on a watershed up in New Hampshire. I was able to show these stories that even though I'd never really set foot in Maryland or done stories in the Chesapeake region, they touched on some of the main themes of water quality and how it relates to people's lives. Yeah. And so I think that another big thing that going back to school was it taught me video skills, which a lot of photojournalists have had to broaden their skill set in that regard. And I was no exception. So that was definitely something that made me more competitive, was not just being able to tell a story through still photos, but being able to write, being able to put a video together, all that business.
Right. So basically, students who are primarily in the sciences who might be interested in this kind of a career might be a good idea for them to take some courses in writing or in like digital media arts or things of that nature. That might be helpful to get started.
Yeah, because ultimately it feeds into just being a good storyteller in general, and when you can figure out the best way to tell a story, and you have the skills to say confidently, oh, like this sounds more like a video, or this sounds more like just a written story, because not everything important is a photo, not everything important is a video. Sometimes you leave stuff to the text.
So what is the best part of your job and what is the worst part of your job?
I think the best part, I was thinking about this, probably somewhere in the interview process. So I get to interview experts who've spent in a lot of cases that their entire lifetime dedicated to a particular subject. So it's really interesting to hear those firsthand perspectives, because you get a sense of the challenges people have come across in their work or their lives, and they've done some problem solving, and usually get it's really great because people tend to be willing to open up during an interview and share things that are more to their core than just like in a casual conversation. So it's an excuse to hear people's life stories, and that's always satisfying. And every story is a learning experience for me, so I get to carry that forward, and then it might inform the next one in terms of the questions I ask the next person. Was there a second half to that question?
What was the worst part of your job?
So I think one of the, I don't know if it's, something that's terrible, but it's just a big challenge is visual storytellers are generally pretty rare at especially at like small nonprofits and environmental organizations, or just nonprofits in general, and increasingly nowadays newspapers with budget cuts and threats to the revenue and you know everything that's going on. There are just fewer ways to make a living in this field, which I've been lucky to buck the trend as far as like I'm very lucky to have a steady job in this industry. But it does mean that I'm basically like a one person visuals department. So even though I've got a communications team, it's always an ongoing effort to educate my coworkers on best practices and that sort of thing, so they can anticipate what my needs are in my role. And so it's that added role of sort of carrying the torch and advocating for strong storytelling and convincing people that it's worth an effort, which we've again we're lucky to have good resources at the Bay program, but that's sort of the exception to the rule, I think. So I think a lot about how we can help support other organizations that aren't big enough to have, like, a lot of them don't even have communication staff dedicated, let alone visual communication staff. And also at, traditional media organizations and like small newspapers who have had to cut their environmental reporters and try to reach out and see if we can lend support that way.
So do a lot of people who do this kind of job end up doing it freelance?
I think yeah. So there. So I kind of have a foot in two worlds as far as like the photojournalism community, where a lot of it is freelance, and then the environmental professional community, where it's a lot of staff at watershed organizations and agencies. So in that realm, it's a lot of it's not freelance. It's more bringing visual storytelling skills to staff that are maybe spending more of their time doing other things. So it might be like a researcher that carries a camera with them, or somebody who's from a writing background, but the course of their job forces them to branch out into like taking pictures and that sort of thing. So I try to tell people that there's like a whole group of people who are out there who might not yet be aware of the environmental community as like a source of employment, and I try to be an advocate to get those folks connected.
Awesome. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? Is this kind of like an ideal sort of stay there and hang on to it kind of job, or are there other sort of directions that somebody can go in a path like this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was in trying to think of where I'll be. I honestly have no idea, but I can at least think about where I was 5 years ago or 6 years ago when I started this job. The room for growth wasn't immediately apparent because there's no role above mine to like graduate into. But I have been able to expand my responsibilities, and I have been promoted from being a specialist to a manager. So I'm in more of a senior role than when I started. So there has been that room for growth, at least in my position, even if I'm not and also I've managed interns since I've started, so that's been a big responsibility and really rewarding experience. If I were to branch out and take a leap of faith, I might go into freelancing again, which I would feel more comfortable doing that now that I've been in one place long enough to establish those relationships with other organizations who might already know who I am and see the value of my work, because it depends on getting a few steady clients and not having like a new client every week.
That makes sense. So what advice would you have for a student who might be interested in going into this kind of a career field?
So one of the pieces of advice that I give, it was sort of, I don't know if it was given to me early on or if I picked it up early on, but you can get a degree, like an undergraduate degree in photojournalism, but it doesn't necessarily leave you with a specialty or an area that you're particularly interested in. So, I definitely see the value in getting an education beyond just the storytelling tools. So like my education, my environmental education gave me the grounding that I wanted to go into a particular field, and that can be more effective than being a jack of all trades and just being a general photographer for hire, because ultimately editors and organizations will hire you for the work in your portfolio that you've that demonstrates what you can do for that editor or that organization or that publication. So if you don't have that focus, it might be okay, you've made great general photos, but how do these relate to our organization? There might be somebody who's more focused. But that said, I think I'm able to stand out at my organization and the similar organizations we work with, because I do have I did go back to school and I got that focused education. So it's a balancing act, because a lot of people are used to a more casual relationship with visual storytelling, like snapping their own photos with an iPhone and that sort of thing. And so they might not be educated on best practices and all that. So when you're able to bring that to the table, it really makes you stand out as well. I've seen listings for communications jobs where they're science communication, and they ask for somebody with a research science background but with some communication skills. And I would say that's discounting the communications part of it. I would say definitely it's easier to well, I would argue that you should instead be looking for a strong storyteller who is able to bring science to that, as opposed to the other way around. If that makes sense.
So the students in our program it's an animal behavior ecology and conservation program.
Mm-hmm.
For students who are coming out of that more science background, is grad school, you think, a really good way? Is that the only way to go to branch out? Or if you have undergrad classes in communication or digital media arts, do you have to go to grad school for a job like this? Or is there a real advantage to going the grad school route, do you think?
That was what worked for me. And ultimately it's your portfolio that is the thing. So if you can find those experiences through enterprising on your own, I would say go for it, and you won't have the student loans to deal with. Or if you can get your foot in the door in an organization by other means, as even on the science side or like on the writing side or that sort of thing, you can gradually bring those additional like visual storytelling skills to that role. That's the route I see folks taking as far as yeah. I feel like I had another point, but yeah.
Well, awesome. That was really interesting. I think it's something that students in our program, a career that a lot of them may not have thought about. So I really appreciate your time and bringing some insight about this for our students.
I
So
think I remembered. I was going to say, you know, in terms of portfolio, that the the thing that will set you apart is personal projects. So, um, you know, they oftentimes don't come through job experience. It's something that you just have to do on your own. You know, a story that you're passionate about that can demonstrate, you know, what the that can show people the type of work that you want to get hired for. And oftentimes it, you know, they come at, you know, on your own time, on your own dime. Um, and besides school, there are workshops and trainings that can get you like the technical skills, because honestly, it's not the technical stuff that is a challenge. It's just building the experience, building your portfolio, and figuring out the stories you want to tell.
awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much for all of those insights, Will. That was really
My pleasure.
to hopefully I'll see you out for a Hellbender story sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's bound to happen at some point.
Or eventually. All right, great. Thank you. Enjoy your trip up to New York.
Thank you. Should be good.
All right. Bye.
Bye bye.